What's good guys, my name is Oleg Nikitin and today we're having a look at Sirui 75mm t2.9 1.6x full frame anamorphic lens, and I hope you did enjoy the footage from France. And this lens is available in 4 different mounts: Nikon Z, Sony E, Canon RF and L mount. It's a second full frame anamorphic lens by Sirui. The first one was t2.9 50mm with 1.6 desqueeze ratio, and I have a huge review of this lens, you can find it down in the description below. So let's start off with the kit. It's pretty regular and simple, so we have front and back caps as well as a very nice pouch, which I took with me to protect the lens. Don't get me wrong guys, it's a huge lens and it weighs 1373 grams, and also you'll need a monitor to properly view the picture and to desqueeze it, and your hands are getting tired pretty fast. So I suggest using a monopod or a better tripod or even a gimbal with this lens. And yeah, you can definitely pump up your muscles with this kit, because the overall weight with the Sony a7S III, the monitor and the lens itself is around 3 kilograms. The build quality and materials are great. It's made out of metal completely. The focus throw is around 90 degrees, which may seem a little short, but it's definitely a bonus for me because I was shooting handheld and it was easy for me to operate the focus with one hand. But if you're gonna be using a follow focus system, it'll be kind of disappointing a little bit. The aperturing is very stiff, so you don't change your aperture accidentally, and both aperture and focus ring have gears, so it's easier to use with the follow focus system straight away. Also, it has a lens support with a 1/4-20, so you can mount this lens directly on your tripod or just use it as a lens support. Unfortunately, it doesn't have weather sealing or weather sealing gasket, but I did take a couple of shots under heavy rain and it wasn't a problem for me. The lens has 82mm filter thread, and I've used a couple of times ND64 filter under very harsh sunlight, or you can use ND32 under the sunlight and it will be more than enough. I like that it has 82mm filter thread because there is a lot of filters out there and you can pick whatever you want to, and they are pretty expensive, but on the other hand, they are very popular and easy to find. The disqueeze ratio is 1.6, it's not really typical, we more often see 1.5, and I used this setting in my Ninja 5 monitor and recorder to properly monitor the picture and judge focus. But if you don't have a monitor and your camera doesn't have an ability to watch desqueezed image in camera, like in some Panasonic cameras if I'm not mistaken, it'll be very hard to use without it, almost impossible. I've used Sony a7S III, and in video mode we have a picture at 16:9 aspect ratio, and if we desqueeze the picture by 1.6, we'll get a picture of 2.8:1 aspect ratio, which is a bit narrow in my opinion. But if we'll use something like 3:2 sensor, like in Panasonic S1 or S1H, and we'll shoot in open gate mode, we'll get 2.4:1 aspect ratio. It's more classic and more usual to see. In my wedding video from Paris, the link is down below of course, I did a crop till 2.35:1 aspect ratio, and I had plenty of room horizontally to make a digital panorama, like I show you in this example. And it's very easy to use and gives you a lot of creative possibilities. On Sony a7S III, horizontally we get an equivalent of about 47mm focal length. And in my opinion, this focal length is perfect. It gives us enough room in the shot horizontally, but still we can see the compression of a semi-telephoto lens. Or let me say a classic field of view for our eyes. A few words about IBIS and digital stabilization. Of course, it's a pretty tough task to shoot with this lens handheld. I even brought some mini monopod with me, but it didn't help at all. But after trying several settings, I found out that the Steady Shot Active gave me the best results, and it was really much better than without any stabilization or IBIS turned off. You would ask, why didn't you use Catalyst Browse with the gyroscopic data? And I would say it's impossible to use with manual lenses, so the camera has to know which lens you're using to be able to achieve the gyroscopic data stabilization. That is why I've used the Steady Shot Active manually set to 75mm, and I had to stabilize every single shot in post. And I would say guys that a lot of shots were just thrown away because of I couldn't stabilize them properly. For instance, when I was trying to go in front of the guys walking, none of those shots turned out to be good. There is a huge pain in the ass with almost all budget anamorphic lenses. Your disqueeze ratio is not constant. So when you focus on infinity, you do get 1.6 disqueeze ratio, but on the minimal focusing distance it's about 1.52x. That is why the faces of people look kinda distorted horizontally, too fat, and you have to apply a different disqueeze to make them look natural basically. And all Sirui anamorphic lenses that I've tested, and I've tested almost all of them, they have this issue. The minimal focusing distance is 85 centimeters, and for an anamorphic lens with this focal length, it's not bad. And I did take the most of my close-up shots without any diopters, but for extreme close-up shots I took with me some diopters. I bought a full set of those, like 4 different diopters with different strength levels for about, I don't know, $30 to $40 on AliExpress. I'll leave a link down below as well. With those diopters you do lose the infinity, but you can use those only for your close-up shots and extreme close-ups. It's a very efficient and budget solution for the minimal focus and distance problems on anamorphic lenses. A few words about the color of this lens. This lens is going to give you a bit warmer image. For instance, during daylight my white balance was set at about 5200 Kelvin, whereas usually I set it at about 5600 Kelvin. And during the nighttime, because of the light poles and all that, I've set it to 2800 Kelvin instead of 3200 Kelvin. But all in all, I do like the color of this lens, and after color grading, in S-Log3 of course, I do like the result. What do you think, guys? This lens is razor sharp from t2.9, and some people would even say that it's a negative for anamorphic optics, but you can always make the image look a little bit softer. For instance, use some film emulation with the Enhancer plugin like I used in my near Louvre example video, or you can just use the blur effect at 1% or use a black pro mist filter, which I didn't have unfortunately, but it's not a big problem in my opinion. And yeah, you can shoot wide open with this lens almost all the time. The vignette is almost non-existent even in the extreme corners of the shot. The same applies to chromatic aberration. You wouldn't see those even wide open in a very contrasty scenes. Optically, this lens is almost perfect. But there is a small irritating nuance when you try to focus on infinity and you rotate your focusing ring till the end trying to get the infinity, you kinda overcome the infinity and you'll have to readjust it. That's annoying. The focus breathing is also almost non-existent. Just look at those example shots, I simply cannot see the focus breathing effect. Distortion is also minimal. Look at this example, we have a very straight building, but we almost don't see a distortion, just a little bit to the edges of the shot, but all in all for the anamorphic lens, it's almost non-existent. When you hear anamorphic optics, first of all you think of flares. And with this lens it's not that simple. During daylight it's very hard to get a blue horizontal large flare. And in my opinion it's more of an advantage because on anamorphic optics I don't like very harsh and sharp and super saturated flares. You also do get a secondary flare which kind of mirrors the main flare. It's up to you if you do like it or not. But during the nighttime, if you point the lens to a very bright source of light, like the headlights of a car for instance, the flares get really bright and saturated. I prefer more kind of fat and less pronounced flares, but if you point your lens at a bigger source of light, you'll get a fatter, better in my opinion, flare. So if you do like a lot of big and bright and saturated flares, you'd better shoot during the nighttime and the brightest sources of light possible. And the second thing you think of when you hear anamorphic optics is bokeh. On this lens, the bokeh balls are more oval and pronounced than on the 50mm t2.9 full-frame anamorphic lens by Sirui because of the focal length. And I have to admit that the shape is almost perfect. Even when you get to the extreme corners of your shot, they still look very nice and oval. Also, there are no patterns or artifacts inside of those ovals and no signs of chromatic aberrations on the edge of the bokeh oval itself. We have 10-bladed aperture and overall the bokeh looks creamy and very nice. Of course, to see those bokeh balls, bokeh ovals let me say, you have to have some leaves out of focus or some light poles or whatever, so to be able to see them you'll need to find them basically. And near Louvre it was very hard to get those out of focus ovals because there were no such objects like, the trees. So keep that in mind. My impressions? I did like the image from the Sirui 75mm t2.9 1.6x, even more than with the 50mm t2.9 because we can see more of anamorphic characteristics on the 75mm lens. We have more pronounced bokeh ovals and overall the feeling about the image is better in terms of 75mm lens, just in my opinion, guys. T2.9, isn't it too slow of an aperture? Because we would love to shoot in low light, and I would say that for Sony a7S III it's not a problem. I raised up my ISO till 52,000 and it was more than okay. And in terms of depth of field and out of focus backgrounds, of course I would love to see a T2 lens, but let's be real, it would be much heavier, much pricier, and much bulkier. So no complaints here as well, because it's just laws of physics, guys. The price of this lens is $1,500, and considering that it's like 10 times or 20 times or multiple times less than the professional anamorphic optics, it's not that expensive, especially for a full-frame anamorphic lens. So let's conclude, guys. Sirui 75mm t2.9 1.6x anamorphic lens is a real deal. I even liked it more than the 50mm lens, but keep in mind, guys, that you have to use a tripod or some kind of a gimbal to work with it properly. And if you do so, you can get some outstanding results. And also you'll enjoy the process, that's for sure. I would even leave this lens in my kit if I could. Of course I cannot, because it's sample units, but overall I would love to pair this lens with Sirui 35mm t2.9 1.6x, which is a pretty new lens from Sirui. And I hope I'll make a review of this one soon as well. So if you are a happy owner of a full-frame mirrorless camera, and especially Panasonic S1H and S1 with open gate video recording in 6K 3x2 sensor, this Sirui Anamorphic lens is a no-brainer. Guys, just go rent this lens and test it out, try it out, examine, create, and I'm sure that you'll get some new emotions. I can definitely recommend this lens. So guys, if you did enjoy this video and the shots I took in France, go ahead and smash the like and subscribe buttons and the notifications bell. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care, bye.